We know that the trans agenda is anti-truth, anti-reality, anti-science, but that alone is not what makes it so harmful. I mean, flat earthers are also anti-reality, and yet we don't spend a lot of time worrying that our kids will get sucked into that cult. What makes the trans agenda so dangerous and destructive is that the truths it militates against are the most basic truths of all. It seeks to warp a person's understanding of themselves, of their own identity. I mean, it's one thing to have wild misconceptions about the shape of the earth. It's another to have wild misconceptions about yourself, your body, your identity, your place in the world. But the trans cult does something else too, which many other cults before it have done, though none with anywhere near this level of success. It attacks and destabilizes the family. One of the many truths that it opposes is the truth of the nuclear family. It hates the family because that institution, the family, attests so powerfully to the true nature of the human person and of the two sexes. It also hates the family because children raised in stable families, protected and guided by parents in a loving and sturdy marriage, are much more difficult to reach and indoctrinate. They're not impervious. They're not impervious to brainwashing, but they are significantly shielded against it. A family provides a child with an anchor. He is secured, he's sheltered, protected. The groomers then have to take away this anchor, blow up the family, leaving kids unmoored and unprotected, vulnerable, like a baby deer wandering through the forest, easy prey for the wolves. This is why the groomers spend so much time and so much effort trying desperately to place this wedge in between the child and the parent. This is why we hear about so many schools that have policies of intentionally hiding a student's LGBT self-identification from parents. And even after all the backlash and outrage over these sorts of policies, still many teachers continue to engage in this kind of predatory behavior and brag about it openly. Here's just the latest example from this week.
If you as a teacher have a student come to you and tell you that they are gay, part of the LGBTQ community, whether they are looking into transitioning, anything like that, but they don't want their parents to know yet. The question on the news was, as a teacher, is it your responsibility, or as a school, is it your responsibility to inform the parents of what their child is going through? On the news, they all said yes. It is the schools, the teachers, the counselors, due diligence to let these parents know what the kids are going through. As a teacher, I disagree. I did have a student come and tell me this last year that she was gay. She did not want her mom to know, and I respected her wishes.
Now, that teacher, like so many others, wants to have intimate knowledge of a child that the child's parents do not have. This is a classic cult tactic. It's right from the cult handbook. The recruiter of the cult seeks to form a bond with the recruit that supersedes any bond they have with anybody else, including and especially family members. Take that crowbar and pry the child away from the parent. That's the idea. And increasingly, the prying is taking more aggressive and invasive forms, often involving the courts, acting as the crowbar. In my film, What is a Woman?, we heard the story, of course, of a father in Canada who was sent to jail and lost custody of his daughter because he wouldn't affirm her as a boy, for simply insisting that his daughter is his daughter, that she is his daughter and not his son, that the girl he helped conceive and raise still exists. He lost everything. This sort of thing happens frequently in Canada and will become even more frequent with the recent passage of an anti-conversion therapy law, so-called, which declares it an illegal form of conversion therapy for anyone, including parents, to refuse to use biologically incorrect pronouns for a child. If you do that, if you call a girl she, and she wants to be called he, then you are now engaging in conversion therapy. It's against the law. You're a criminal. We'll put you in jail and take your kids away. But it's also starting to happen in the U.S. Now, there have already been well-known cases like the Jeff Younger case that you've probably heard about. Even before that, there were cases like one in Ohio, for example, where two parents, in this case, there are two parents still married, lost custody of their daughter because they refused to allow her to medically transition into a boy. The judge legally kidnapped the girl and gave custody to the grandparents that she, Judge Sylvia Hendon, trusted would facilitate the child's drugging and mutilation. Now, that happened back in 2018. And it's only going to become more common now as time continues, which means we're going to see more and more stories like that of Jeanette Cooper. Now, Jeanette Cooper is a 44-year-old woman whose tragic tale was highlighted this week by journalist Kelsey Bolar of the Independent Women's Forum. On the IWF website, she tells the story of how Cooper, who's the mother to a 12-year-old girl, also, by the way, a lifelong progressive Democrat, by no means is this like a conservative with an axe to grind ideologically. It's a progressive Democrat woman and mother, lost custody of her daughter because, unlike her ex-husband, she wouldn't affirm her daughter's deluded idea that she was really a boy. Reading now from the article says, Jeanette Cooper never imagined she'd lose custody of her child. The 44-year-old lifelong educator always considered herself a loving and responsible mother to her daughter, Sophia. But when, at age 12, Sophia suddenly claimed to be transgender, Jeanette was skeptical. Sophia had never exhibited signs of gender dysphoria. In fact, Sophia exhibited many more traditionally feminine behaviors and preferences than Jeanette ever had. To Jeanette, it didn't make sense. But Sophia insisted not only that she was trans, but that she was unsafe around Jeanette. What followed was an almost Kafkaesque series of court proceedings and therapy sessions in which Jeanette's ex-husband, lawyers, therapists, and other individuals and institutions supposedly concerned with Sophia's best interests worked to erode Jeanette's most basic parenting rights. Nearly 3 years later, Jeanette can't even visit with the daughter she loves. She lives less than 10 minutes away, but can only communicate with Sophia by U.S. mail. All because she insists that Sophia is a girl. Now, from here, we're told the whole story about how Jeanette and her husband divorced in 2015. Now, at first, Jeanette was, as very often happens, was awarded almost full custody of her daughter. She had her daughter 6 days a week. But then one day at the age of 12, her daughter goes for a visit to her father's, who, by the way, had recently remarried and was now married to a psychotherapist. And she goes for the visit and never returns. The girl announced out of nowhere that she was trans and couldn't live with her mother anymore because her mother's disagreement with trans ideology made her feel unsafe. Now, Jeanette suspects, and with good reason, I'm guessing, that the girl's psychotherapist stepmom has a lot to do with her daughter's discovery of her male identity. There's probably something to that theory, but also I'm sure she picked it up from school. She picked it up from social media. We've heard this story over and over and over again. So many parents with this exact story. Most of the time, they're adolescent girls, but not always. Girls perfectly fine, no signs of gender dysphoria at all, no indication ever at any point in her life that she was confused about her gender, and then one day, out of nowhere, just like that, she says, oh, I'm trans. Now, in this case, the court ordered an investigation of Jeanette to find out if her daughter was actually unsafe around her, because that's what the daughter said. So they ordered an investigation, took 7 months investigating this mother, and found no abuse, no neglect. But they did decide that Jeanette needs to, quote, further her understanding of and support of the minor child as relates to the minor child's gender dysphoria. Translation, she's not on board with the trans agenda, and so she can't see her daughter anymore. And she hasn't. She hasn't had any physical contact with her child for the past 3 years. Now, eventually, and this is where it gets even more sinister, if that's possible. Eventually, she was forced to negotiate a deal, right? And here was the deal that she was given by the court. In exchange for giving up any legal right to see her daughter again, she was assured in writing that her daughter would not undergo a medical transition without her permission or a court order. Okay, so this is the deal with the devil that parents are now forced to make. Give up your rights to your daughter, or we will mutilate her. We will cut her to pieces if you don't give up your rights to her. Imagine being a parent and having to face that decision. And so she says, well, I guess I have no choice. I'm never going to see my daughter again. But at least she won't be mutilated. But the thing is, part of the deal here is that even if you agree with a court order, we can still mutilate her. And we know how easy it is to get the court order. Jeanette points out correctly that murderers in prison now have more communication and contact with their children than she does. That kind of makes sense in a certain way because as far as the system is concerned, she's worse than a murderer. I mean, she's a transphobe. That's the cardinal sin. There's an interview on YouTube that Jeanette did with the Independent Women's Forum worth watching. She explains why she rejects the idea that she should simply have, relented and allowed her daughter to take the lead and do whatever she wants. Here's what she says about that.
And what I have been told is to follow her lead, to follow her in this journey. I am not willing to do that. I don't think that is good parenting. It's my responsibility not to hook my boat to hers. It is my responsibility to be a lighthouse, to be something stable that she can see, some guide that she has that will always be there, that is consistent. I still do that today, even though I have no custody of her. I have no medical decision-making, no educational decision-making, and no way to communicate with her other than by mail.
One thing you could see just watching that video is, I mentioned this is a progressive Democrat, feminist, the mother is, and you could tell just by looking at her. This is, she's partially shaved head and the whole 9 yards. This, and she talks about in the article too, in the interview, how she doesn't believe in traditional gender roles. But even then, not good enough as far as the far left radicals on the court are concerned. In family court, as far as they're concerned, still not good enough. You're progressive, Democrat, everything else, feminist, not good enough. Your kid's still not safe because there's this one item on the progressive agenda that you do not go along with. The imagery that she, mentions there of a lighthouse is quite powerful, and it's correct. If your child is lost in the fog of confusion, not sure which way is up, not able to discern east from west, not sure who they are, your job as a parent is to be a light and a voice of calm and clarity. It's not to abandon your child to the mist and say, hey, just wander around in whatever direction you want. You'll figure it out. Yeah, whatever. Just go that way. It's fine. But that's the strategy the court demands. Turn the light off, leave your child to the dark, or else we'll take her from you, they say. Now, sort of at the end of this story here, at least up until this point, most recent development, is Jeanette's daughter doesn't even identify as trans anymore. Okay, so when she originally came out as, quote, trans, and her mother said, I don't buy it, she was right. She doesn't identify as trans anymore. She identifies as non-binary and uses ze, zer, zers pronouns. Which means that this is included too, by the way. We take your kids away. Affirm your daughter as a zer, whatever the hell that is, or we'll take her from you. Of course, if you're in this position as a parent and you ask the court, what even is a zer? Like, what does that mean? What are you telling me I have to do? They can't explain it. It's total nonsense. But what does it mean for the girl? It means that she's grappling around helplessly. She's totally lost and confused. She has no idea who she is. But that's exactly what the groomers want. If you want to join my exclusive fan base, or a cult, that's what it is. We're forming a cult. Then all you got to do is click the subscribe button and ring the bell below this video to stay up to date with all my content. And if you want even more, you can watch or listen to my show at thedailywire.com, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Looking forward to welcoming you to the Sweet Baby Gang.